Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the July version of the St. Croix County Board of Supervisors Community Development Committee meeting. We'll start tonight the way we always do, introducing ourselves and saying who we represent. We'll start with Sean.
Sean Anderson, District 2, the town of Somerset and the town of St. Joseph.
Judy Ochterhoff, District 17, which consists of Deer Park, Silen, Emerald, Forest, Glenwood, and Glenwood City.
Ed Chalkner, District 1, the Village of Somerset, and the rest of Somerset that Sean doesn't represent.
I'm Dan Hansen. I represent District 12, which is the northern part of New Richmond and the southern part of Star Prairie Township.
Ellen Denzer, Community Development Director.
Mike Wozniak, Land Use Administrator.
Julie Peterson, Community Development Department.
There's quite a few other people who are staff in the Community Development Department who will introduce themselves as we go. I'd also mention that our Vice Chair of the County Board is here, Bill Peavy, and so here we go. We'd like to approve the minutes from our last meeting. That would take a motion. Anybody feel like making a motion?
I so move to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
Second.
So moved and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Anybody here from the public would like to make a comment? Going once, going twice. Seeing none, we'll move right into public hearings. And I'll just describe how this is going to work. We have 4 public hearings. We'll run through all 4 of them, and then we'll take up the actions that those public hearings instigate after that in the same order. So starting with the rezoning from residential to commercial from the town of Somerset, the Pierce Mickelson, we'll ask Mr. John Hilders for a staff report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. The first item on your agenda tonight is a public hearing for a rezoning application within the town of Somerset. A little bit of background, the property owners are Thomas Mickelson and Leanne and Jeff Pierce. The agent is Ed Hendricks. There is no address for the site. It's located at the southeast quadrant of the intersection of County Road V and Highway 35. The request is to rezone from R2 residential district to C3 commercial district. Next, I'll just go through a quick sequence of maps to give you a little bit of background. Map number 1 is just a snippet from our zoning map. The town of Somerset did adopt Chapter 15, the revised zoning code. It went into effect January 10th of this year. The parcel in question is outlined in blue with the red arrow pointed to it. Shows everything is currently R2. Next, we go to the aerial photo, gives it a little bit more perspective. The property in question is outlined in red. County V to the east, and then Highway 35 and the off-ramp just to the north and east. There are existing commercially zoned properties, the St. Croix National Golf Club to the east. We also have the fireworks facility, T-Buckets Bar and Grill, and T&T trailer. And all these parcels are currently zoned commercial. The agent did propose or submit a proposed concept layout, which will be reviewed by staff at a later date pending approval of this request. But you can see what's being contemplated is approximately 6 lots that'll be bisected with an access road through the development. Again, County V on the east, off-ramp, and Highway 35 off to the northwest. This next map just shows some of the slopes on the property. Everything you see in purple has a slope in excess of 25%. Everything you see in the salmon color, kind of the red-orange, are slopes between 20 and 25%. These will have to be accounted for as the developer works through the land division process. We do have limits on the amount of slopes that can be impacted in the development process. So for example, of slopes greater than 25%, no land disturbance shall take place except for public improvements. So when staff reviews rezoning requests, we look at a number of documents to measure the request against. The main ones are the comprehensive plans. First, we'll just touch base real quick on the Town of Somerset Comprehensive Plan. The snippet you see here is a picture taken from the comprehensive plan for the Town of Somerset. And when they redid their comprehensive plan in 2015, they did contemplate commercial development in this area, and they show this in their plan by virtue of what they call a commercial node that's shown by the red dashed line here. Again, the subject property is right at the edge of the arrow here, golf course off to the east, and some of those smaller commercial lots right here. So by virtue of that, we took a look at the comprehensive plan, looked at the land use plan, the future land use plan for the town, which contemplates and projects future land uses. And it would appear this request is consistent with the town's comprehensive plan. Next, we take a look at the county comprehensive plan. The county has a future land use plan as well. And you can see indicated by the arrow, orange arrow right here, it sits right at the intersection, just to the south and west of areas already contemplated for commercial development. The county's comprehensive plan and future land use map are meant to incorporate local plans into the county's plan. So by virtue of Somerset incorporating commercial uses at this major intersection, it would appear the county's land use plan would support that, especially given the proximity to the other adjacent commercial uses. These next series of maps just provide a little bit of perspective of the property. On map number 2 shows some of the unique features. The parcels do not contain any waterfowl production areas, prairie remnant sites, or sensitive areas. There is, however, a closed depression that's located kind of on the northerly, an environmental corridor. And the purpose of the environmental corridor is to identify unique features. And in these areas, it's primarily clusters of wooded areas. Map number 3 maps where the closed depression is. The property does get a little bit lower in elevation at the north end of the site. There's also a tip of the shoreland overlay district at the very southeasterly tip of the property, right there. The parcels do not contain any wetlands or soils that are limiting for septic systems. There are no floodplains or intermittent streams to be concerned about. Map number 4 just shows some of the areas that are currently farmed, indicated with the green slash. There are also some gravel and sand deposits on the site. And again, this map shows some of the slopes that we talked about earlier. As far as governmental agency review, the Town Board of Somerset did review this request on a couple different occasions, and the Town Board does recommend approval, and they did so at their April 1st and June 3rd meetings. We also review objectives and purpose statements from the county's comprehensive plan. I won't go through them all, but we did review the economic development goals and objectives. And to list one is to promote and maintain downtowns and commercial areas. And then a sample of the land use goals under number 5, it is to provide for a balance of land use types throughout the county. As the developer progresses through their process, the next step would be for them to submit a concept review for review by staff, and it would require compliance with our Chapter 12 sanitary codes, Chapter 13 land division, and of course Chapter 15 zoning. Community development action tonight, you can take a number of actions. You can recommend approval of the amendment, recommend approval with modifications, and recommend disapproval of the amendment. After review of the comprehensive plan land use maps and objectives and policies within those documents, staff would recommend approval of the rezoning amendment for the 3 parcels based on the staff findings that the rezoning is consistent with the county comprehensive plan as well as the town of Somerset's plan, and that the town board of Somerset did recommend approval of this rezoning request. And again, it would appear that the proposed use is consistent with and must comply with the standards in chapters 12, 13, and 15. That concludes our staff summary. As of 5 o'clock today, we have not received any public comment from the posted and published notices.
We'll save committee questions for the business item. At this time, is there any questions from the public? Anybody like to speak in favor or against this rezoning? Seeing none, we'll close public hearing on this particular item, Town of Somerset, Pierce Mickelson. And we will take up public hearing for a setback reduction request in the town of Richmond for Jeff Osby. And again, or this one we'll ask Mike Wozniak to come up to the podium. Thank you, John.
Julie, can you get in there, or do I need to do that? Oh, okay.
Good evening. We have a road setback reduction waiver request and for Jeff Osby. This item, I just note that this is at 1397 134th Avenue, Lot 11, Stone Run Estates, Town of Richmond. I would note included with the submittal staff report and application, and this is dealing with Chapter 13.10B. And the typical included with your submittals, with your staff reports on these setback waivers is a item here that I won't completely read through this, but this basically addresses the history of structure setbacks and notes that the properties that were land divisions, plats that were before January 1st, 2006 have 100-foot structure setback lines from road right-of-ways. And these are approved with a map of record. Was either a plat map, which is an instrument used to create and record 5 lots or more subdivision lots, or a certified survey map that's used to create 4 lots or less. Now, what's required with these, and you've been through these before, is basically they're presented to the committee and with a public hearing, and there would be required a correction instrument prepared by a land surveyor to be filed with the Register of Deeds. And so essentially that's what the applicant's request is on this one. Under provisions of the Land Division Ordinance, the applicant's asking to reduce the structure setback found on Lot 11, the plat of Stone Run Estates, from 100 feet to 50 feet along the 134th Avenue frontage of the property. And a correction instrument prepared by a registered land surveyor will be recorded at the Register of Deeds office, noting the removal of the existing structure setback as shown on the recorded lot. Now, included with the background material, the applicant provided a site plan which shows a proposed dwelling location somewhat in this area. And I'd note just some of the issues that pertain to this. Again, there's structure setbacks of 100 feet noted on the plat from both the 140th Street and 134th Ave road frontages. And it's a corner lot with really extensive road frontage based on the configuration of the lot. As you can see, kind of triangular in shape. No access will be allowed to 140th. And the driveway location is really in a fixed position based on topography and the fact that there's a existing swale that runs along the along the west portion of the property, north to south, and then crosses under 134th Avenue to carry stormwater to a ponding area. And so this limits the available lot area, and you can see on this diagram there is a sanitary area identified which somewhat limits the buildable area. And I would just go, well, actually they're proposing to site the home approximately 64.66 feet from the 134th Ave property line right away. And just a couple photos I've included here. There is a photo that basically it's at the, looking where the driveway, approximately where the driveway would enter the property. And you can see an area that's really the prime buildable area of the site, and this is why they're wanting the setback waiver, so they can build in the area that really makes the most sense on the property. The other view is just along 140th, and it's a little lower towards the corner, and really if one were to look at the structure setbacks elsewhere along 140th, it probably wouldn't be appropriate to grant a waiver of that 100-foot setback along 140th, and that's not what they're asking for. In terms of findings, the committee may approve reduction of the road setback on an approved final plat or certified survey map to that specified in the applicable governing ordinance if the following standards are met, and those would be setback or setbacks in a recorded subdivision may only be changed by a correction instrument prepared by a Wisconsin registered land surveyor and recorded. And also, a setback reduction shall only be allowed in unusual circumstances where a reduction of the setback will allow the lot or structures on the lot to be in greater compliance with the objectives and standards of the ordinance and county zoning ordinance, and will not negatively impact layout, design, continuity, and/or aesthetics of the neighborhood. And I'll note we haven't received any comment from the town of Richmond on this. The staff recommendation basically is for a recommendation for approval. We're recommending findings identified in the four statements noted as paragraphs 1 through 4. Reduced structure setback will allow the lot or structures on the lot to be in greater compliance with the objectives and standards of chapters 13 and chapter 15. And due to the extensive road frontage, triangular lot configuration, the existing drainage swale, and the fixed driveway location, that the reduced structure setback will not negatively impact the layout, design, continuity, or aesthetics of the neighborhood. Oh, thank you. And finally, the staff recommendation that the Community Development Committee approve the setback reduction based on findings 1 through 4, and with the requirement that a Wisconsin registered land surveyor must record a correction instrument to reduce the setback as per Section 13.10B1 of the Land Division Ordinance. And staff can answer any questions you may have.
I think we'll wait until after the, when we're in the business item,
Very good.
and I think we'll have questions, but we'll wait until then. Is there any public comment on this? However, I'd like to hear from anybody in the public who would like to speak in favor of or against this setback waiver. Seeing none, we'll end this. Oh, we have one. Excuse me. Yes, sir. We have to ask you to come up to the
Mr.
microphone,
Oswald?
introduce yourself.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
Eric Brennan, I was looking to build a house for him.
Okay. Oh, pardon, you're the agent.
Yes, I was just gonna make the comment.
We'll ask you to speak at the microphone, say who you are and where you live.
Sorry, I'll do this.
It's okay. It's kind of the official public record, you know.
Sure. I guess I gotta state my name and all that stuff. Okay, I'm Eric Brennan. I was gonna hopefully build the house for Mr. Osby. And I guess I was just having, when you guys look at it, I guess my biggest thing is just to look at the buildable site area on this. I mean, that's the only reason that we're really trying to recommend this, because there's really nowhere else to put the house sensibly on this lot. So that's the biggest thing. I just hope, you know, once you guys look at it, you can take for, I mean, where the septic is, and then there's the 100-foot setbacks, obviously on 2 different roads. I mean, without this, I don't necessarily know that we can even put a house on there without removing the setback. So I guess that's all I had.
Thanks very much. Anybody else like to say something in favor or opposed to this setback waiver? Okay, then. We're going to move on. We'll close this public hearing, and we'll move on to public hearing number 3, which is setback reduction request in the town of St. Joseph for Michael Runheim. Again, we'll ask Mr. Mike Wozniak to take the podium.
Okay, we have another setback waiver request, this one from Michael Runheim, his agent being J&S Contracting. This property is located at 1364 Birch Park Circle. This would be Lot 16, and I'd just like to note an error, typo just on this sheet. It's the plat of Birch Park, not the plat of White Eagle. I think it's correct elsewhere in the staff report, and it's correct when we notice this with public hearing as well. This is currently under Chapter 17, and it's in a rural residential zone. Included with your packet are the staff report and the application materials provided by Mr. Runheim. Again, I won't be redundant and read through this again, but we have the usual material that's included on the history of structure setbacks, and so you understand why this waiver is required. In this case, to build an accessory garage closer to the property, north property line of Mr. Runheim's lot. Under the provisions of the Land Division Ordinance, the applicant's request is to reduce the structure setback found on Lot 36 of the plat of Birch Park from 100 feet to the current zoning ordinance setback standard of 50 feet from the right-of-way along County Road E. A correction instrument prepared by a registered land surveyor will be recorded at the Register of Deeds office, noting the removal of the existing structure setback as shown on the recorded lot. Included in the background material in the staff report, we've referenced a few items. One, the structure setback, the 100-foot setback from County E is denoted with a red line on this graphic on this slide. And we've noted steep slopes on the property, especially along the driveway, which basically runs along the what would be the east property boundary. The lot's heavily wooded, and building in any place, building the garage any place on the lot, really the only opportunities would be somewhere along the driveway, and that would really require a great deal of grading and tree removal, and would also greater impact the aesthetics as viewed from the neighboring property to the east. And I would note also that the applicant is proposing with his construction to actually sort of put the structure sort of into the hillside, and so it will further reduce the impact, height impact of the structure, but it's really in a portion of the lot that's pretty surrounded heavily by trees and probably not very visible to anyone off the site anyways. This slide we included just to show the topography for Mr. Runheim's lot, which is showing a considerable amount of slope. The house location in this area is really the flattest part of the site, and the proposed garage location at the end of the existing driveway where there's a turnaround, and you can see that drawn out on the site plan that was provided with the application, where the proposed garage site would be right in here. And basically, this proposed site, it's not going to put the structure all the way back to what would be the 50-foot setback. It's probably only encroaching into that approximately 20 feet. You can see there's a drain field area back there, and the road frontage along County Road E to the north is heavily wooded, and frankly, the structure isn't going to be visible hardly, if at all, from County Road E based on the lay of the land and the heavily wooded nature of it. This is just a view of the driveway looking up towards where the dwelling site area would be. And you can see the heavily wooded nature, and it does slope off to the what would be the left of this photo. And if there had to be grading in this area for a structure, it probably could involve 20 to 25 feet of fill to get a building pad for a garage structure, and would heavily impact the lot, and I think be detrimental to the character of this beautiful subdivision. In terms of findings, the committee may approve reduction of the road setback on an approved final plat or certified survey map to that specified in applicable governing zoning ordinance if the following standards are met. And again, the standards are the setback in the recorded subdivision may only be changed by a correction instrument prepared by a Wisconsin registered land surveyor and recorded. And the setback shall only be allowed in unusual circumstances where a reduction of the setback will allow the lot or structure or structures on the lot to be in greater compliance with the objectives and standards of the ordinance, in this case Chapter 17, and will not negatively impact the layout, design, and continuity and or aesthetics of the neighborhood. And in this, for this request, the town of St. Joseph has recommended approval of the setback waiver application. They did so on July 9th. Staff recommendation includes 3 findings for you to consider. Reduced structure setback will allow the lot or structures on the lot to be in greater compliance, again, with the objectives and standards of Chapters 13 and 17. And due to the steep slopes over most of the lot and the heavy tree cover, the reduced structure setback will prevent the disturbance of steep slopes and will not negatively impact layout, design, continuity, and/or aesthetics of the neighborhood. And we've noted that the town of St. Joseph has recommended approval of the setback waiver. The recommendation is for approval based on the findings and requirement that a Wisconsin registered land surveyor must record a correction instrument to reduce the setback per section 13.10B1 of the Land Division Ordinance.
Very good, thank you very much. Excuse me. Now, is there any comments from the public? Do we have anybody who'd like to speak for or against this setback reduction request? All right, seeing none, we will move on to number 4. We have farmland preservation plan area map change, and that will be Brett.
Good evening, Chair Hansen and committee. I have before you tonight farmland preservation plan and comprehensive plan amendment dealing specifically with the farmland preservation area map. The reason for the amendment, the town of Croix updated their farmland preservation zoning in 2018-2019. They made changes to their future land use map, and this would request to amend the farmland preservation area map would allow them to add additional land into the farmland preservation zoning. We also had 2 requests from individual landowners, one in the town of Baldwin and one in the town of Springfield, to rezone land to farmland preservation. They weren't able to do that because their property was not in the farmland preservation area. So this amendment will allow that to happen as well, and then ultimately increase land in the farmland preservation zoning. A little bit of the history. Comprehensive plan was first adopted in November of 2012. I can't see that there. Amended in 2017. Statute 66-101 authorizes a county to have a comprehensive plan. And then Chapter 91, if a county has a comprehensive plan and a farmland preservation plan, the farmland preservation plan must be included in the comprehensive plan. So therefore, this is an amendment to 2 plans but 1 plan, if that makes sense. And the county board adopted the farmland preservation plan in January of 2012. The farmland preservation plan zoning allows landowners to collect tax credits, allows them to participate in agricultural enterprise areas, and if they're zoned Ag 2 or farmland preservation 2, they can do some agricultural entertainment activities. So now we'll move into the actual map. Here's the farmland preservation plan map for the entirety of St. Croix County. There's 2 criteria to be in the farmland preservation area. That's the green that's on our map across the county, the land evaluation and site assessment, or LISA, and town future land use maps. If you look on quite a bit of the western part of the county, those towns there, their future land use maps were more designated towards rural residential development. That's why there's no green. And then other places where the LISA controlled, whether it was in the farmland preservation area, had to do with soils, site configuration, productivity for agriculture, and size of parcels. The farmland preservation plan has to be certified by the Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection, DATCAP. So this had to be sent to DATCAP before it came here for certification. Here's the letter from DATCAP certifying this amendment in 2012, or December 20th, 2019. We received certification. We were going to have the public hearing on this matter in March, but that got delayed. So now I'll talk about the individual towns and the parcels there. In the town of Troy, there were 363 acres added to the farmland preservation area and 101 acres removed. The green striped areas here, I'll circle some of the areas there that were added. There were some added down here to the farmland preservation area, additional acres over here. Some of the removed was along the intersection of the highway. There's a parcel removed there and some there. So those were removed from the town of Troy's farmland preservation area. The ones that were added can now go into the farmland preservation zoning for the town of Troy, be added to their certified district and receive tax credits. Moving on to the town of Baldwin, this parcel is at 747 230th Street. It was a 3-acre parcel. If you see right here circled in red. 3 acres parcel at the time that we did it, 3 acres was below our minimum for farmland preservation. It's not a parcel to really preserve for farmland, so it wasn't included in the farmland preservation area. It can't be added to farmland preservation zoning unless it's in farmland preservation area. The 3-acre parcel is buying additional land behind it that is in farmland preservation zoning and area. So now we'll be able to add that parcel to it in the farmland preservation area, and they'll be able to get farmland preservation zoning. Town of Springfield, 2909 County Road Double D, up in the north part of Springfield, again circled in red. There's 2 parcels there. 40 acres. In this case, it wasn't farmland preservation area because of its soils and its existing zoning. So after we reviewed the existing zoning and that it was going to become zoned ag, it got additional points. Plus this property, the large property to the west, was recently rezoned to Ag 2, so that adds additional LISA points. So those parcels went from 111 and 112 on this LISA score over the threshold to 118 and 120, and that was our statistical threshold to be considered for long-term agriculture. In summary, the town of Troy adopted that farmland preservation zoning. These requests would allow additional property to be in farmland preservation zoning within the town of Troy. Even though they have their own zoning, it's a county-wide farmland preservation plan. So we needed to make those changes, and we had those requests from Baldwin and Springfield. The rezonings would not be possible without being in the farmland preservation area, and will allow an increase in the farmland preservation zoning.
Thank you very much. Again, we'll wait with questions from the committee until we get to the business item. At this time, I'd ask if there's any questions from the public. Corp comments. Or comments, excuse me, comments from the public. They've been set straight. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, we will close this public hearing and move into our business items. And we will take up business item number 1, ordinance amending comprehensive zoning ordinance in the town of Somerset, which is the Pierce-Michelson. And we'll need a motion, and then we can begin our discussion.
I move that we recommend approval to the county board to rezone the land in the town of Somerset for Pierce Hendricks to commercial.
I'll second.
That was Pierce-Michelson.
Is it Michelson or Hendrickson? Oh, it is Michelson.
Yeah,
I
Pierce-Michelson.
wrote down the wrong one. I should know that too.
Yeah, okay then. So, we have it's moved and seconded. Let's open her up for discussion. Do we have any comments? Seeing none, let's put that one to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. Let's go to number 2. We'll have a motion.
So move.
Okay, we have a motion for setback reduction waiver in the town of Richmond for Jeff Osby. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. By way of discussion, does anybody have any comments, questions?
Yeah, I just have one comment. If the town, if we approve this and then the town of Richmond belatedly says that they don't agree with us, can they do anything about it, or it's done if we agree?
They will have to approve a building permit dwelling.
Right.
As far as the waiver, though, they have no authority over the waiver. That's simply a recommendation.
That was something that crossed my mind too as we were going through this. One thing that we talked about last month when we were setting goals is that we would have, strive to have a better relationship with the townships and with township leadership. And, you know, I haven't talked to Gary Knudsen for a long time, but I suspect that if they haven't had a word on this, that, do we know why they haven't had a comment on this, or has it gone before them?
I'm not sure. I haven't been in communication with them. It was referred to them. I can certainly follow up on that just to make sure we have some communication pending your action this evening.
Actually, no, you should take action tonight because the waiver does not require town board input. It's not like a rezoning where they have a reversal or any other.
Okay.
And if they wanted to comment, they're usually given plenty of time to comment. We give them, I don't know, you could wanted to comment, understand that, but we could go through the process. But they are given quite a bit of time. A lot of these, the towns don't think they're a big deal. So they don't comment, especially on the waivers.
Very good.
I just add, in this case, as the builder had noted, it's probably the only practical location to build a house on that particular lot based at its unique configuration.
Well, I don't like going against staff recommendation either, so I just want to make sure that we're not stepping anybody's toes down in the township either, so. Okay, should we put her to a vote? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Taking item number 3, setback reduction waiver for the town of St. Joseph for Michael Runheim. Do we have a motion?
I move that we recommend approval for the setback reduction.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Very good. It's been moved and seconded. Do we have conversation on this item? Seeing none, let's take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to number 4, ordinance to adopt farmland preservation plan to area map amendments to the St. Croix County 2012 to 2035 comprehensive plan. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the farmland preservation plan area map amendments.
And I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Do we have any conversation, discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carries unanimously. That was easy. Thank you very much. Next up is our financial report for June of 2020. That would be Ken and Ellen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've heard that we do a very good job with our books, so I don't anticipate there's too many questions on the financial reports. But do you have any for us? At this point in the time of year we're at, we're running about 50% budget. Most of the numbers are looking good for that. You guys have a really big packet. I'm having trouble finding it. There we go. All right. So we should be running about 50% roughly where we're at right now in the year, and we're doing really well. As Ellen pointed out earlier to me today, and maybe stealing her thunder here, parks revenues are doing very well compared to where we were last year. You can see that right here. So last year we were at, I'm going to highlight that row. So last year at this time we were at $104,000 in park fees and rents, and this year we're at $128,000 through the end of June. So we're running ahead of schedule from where we were in prior years. That's maybe a lot of staycations instead of going out for longer vacations. So, whenever there's a change in economic conditions, you're going to see increases in some areas and decreases in other areas. So this is one of those areas where we're seeing increased revenues.
And this has nothing to that, but imagine how much even more we'd have if we had more of those camping shelters built. This would have been a perfect time. One of the few positives.
And I would just add that while this is gross numbers, but because Ken always looks at it after we pay our fees to the state, our sales tax and all that, but gross revenues so far through July 15th for the parks at $273,000.
Wow.
So you didn't steal all my thunder.
But overall, the numbers are looking very good. So if you had any specific questions on them, I'd be happy to answer them. But those were some of the highlights.
No, I looked it over earlier and I couldn't find any red flags, which is such a relief. I'm getting used to the format. Finally, it took 2 years, but I'm starting to appreciate it.
Very good,
So,
thank you.
Thank you. All right, here ends the financial review. That was too easy. You have to throw us some kind of hardball next time. Okay, next up will be our conversation of the 2020 St. Croix County Fair budget allocation. And we'll have Gail Meyer and Cindy Van Dyke. Please come to the podium. And we have a handout. I'd like to preface this by explaining that we had a conversation at our last committee meeting. This is largely an operating budget, and because the fair was canceled, I suggested that we reallocate these funds, and we've invited the representatives from the Fair Board to come and explain why they think we should not reallocate the funds. I'll be looking for a motion to reallocate the funds from the committee. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, everyone, just kind of going off what Ken and Ellen just reiterated to you, our gross revenue this year is zero for the fair. So that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight. The handout that I gave you kind of details that our 2020 operating budget is roughly $30,000, our expenses, and yet that we still need to cover yet this year, as well as expenses going forward in 2021 before we even have a fair of an additional about $88,000. So we're looking at $119,000 in expenses that we're going to have to incur and pay out before the fair in 2021. Our balance sheet, we have about $77,000 in our operating budget right now. We anticipate that we'll get another $40,000 with our winter storage, giving us a total of $117,000 before the fair, any income from the fair next year. So we're already operating at a little bit of a deficit there. That gives us no funding at all for any kind of capital improvements or things that have been earmarked in our last budget that we were going to accomplish this year. And so that's why we're here asking that $80,000 from the county budget for this year be reallocated to us. You have a sheet there on the back. It kind of explains things. And on the back page, you're going to find funds that have been earmarked already for maintenance, funds needed for capital improvements that have been earmarked. Some of them are kind of critical, some of them are not, as well as a long-range planning wish list. So we could certainly use those funds to complete and go ahead with some of those projects and improvements that we had already planned to do.
Do you have any questions for Ms. Meyer? So this is an operating, the $80,000 that we allocate to the fair is operating expenses. It's to put the fair on, is that correct?
Well, in addition to that, some of that, if we break it down, to be honest with you, our annual budget generally runs about $256,000. 52% of that generally comes from income from the fair itself. 15% comes from winter storage, and 33% comes from the county allotment. On the expense side, 44% of that budget comes from expenses related to the fair, and 46% is related to utilities, insurance, other operating expenses, capital improvements, and maintenance that we generally try to figure in for the year.
So when budget time comes around and we have, this is the most thorough document I've ever seen from the Fair Board. When budget time comes around, we get a document that says Fair Board $80,000 with no explanation. I've been told it's an operating expense. There's not a fair this year, and here it is, $80,000. I understand $80,000 for operating expense when there's not a fair. I can't see why we need to put $80,000 into a fair that's not operating. I understand that you have other revenue. With the rentals, $40,000 gives you, money to keep the electricity on and to pay for the lawnmower and et cetera. What else do you need to keep the lights on?
Actually, it does not pay for a lawnmower. We just found out our lawnmower, the transmission went out on it, so that's a $5,000 purchase that we don't have the funds in our operating budget for.
That's a capital expense, not an operating
Correct.
expense.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, so the $80,000 also helps with whatever the fair income revenue doesn't cover, the $80,000, that 33% helps us with these capital improvements and maintenance items and things like that. Right now, we have no extra funding to do any of that.
I'm very, very sorry. I'm looking at a period of time in the county where we have a lot of needs, and I'm having a hard time looking at justifying expenses. And I'm sorry I sound like I'm grilling you. I'm not. I'm trying not to. But I'm having a hard time justifying putting money into an event that doesn't happen when we don't have enough staff in Health and Human Services to deal with the. Go ahead, Judy. I know you're dying to jump in.
Just because we don't have the fair does not mean that there's a lot of expenses that go along with it. And I will say the fair on its own has raised a lot of money for barns, buildings and whatnot, because they care about the animals and they care about the people coming to the fair. What they haven't raised money for is a KIP plan. They use, a capital improvement plan. That's for smaller items like for bathrooms, for painting, the upkeep on all the food stands that could all use a lot of help. And maybe with having this 80,000, they'll have a little bit that they can use it for. It will not go to waste. It will be put for a useful purpose. And yes, we have a lot of other things happening right now, but there's a lot of emergency funds. We have a huge fund balance, and $80,000 in my mind will be very beneficial for the county fair. And people will appreciate it next year and in years to come.
Mr. Chairman, if I may point out that when we do meet with administration and present our budget, we give them a detailed list and a line item, if you will, for how these things work out, our budget and our line items. We also include in our request from the county things that would cover, which this year, when we gave them that request for that $80,000, a good chunk of that was for these things that I've listed on here that we were counting on. And since that money didn't come in, we don't have the opportunity to do those things right now.
Well, what I'd suggest perhaps is that we make a compromise.
I'd like to make a motion to keep the full 80,000 going for the fair. Can I do that? Oh, yeah. I mean, like I explained it, they have a lot of uses that they can put the money forth. And in my mind, it's, for the fair, $80,000 is huge. For a lot of people, $80,000 is huge. For the county, $80,000 is not huge, especially because they have a lot of other state and federal funding coming in to hopefully help with what's happening in the county. And if anything, that $80,000 next summer for businesses, it will make the commercial building maybe more attractive. It will help with Wi-Fi, it will benefit, and in the long run, pay off.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Or does anybody want to, do we have a committee, we can be a little bit more, we can massage that if somebody wants to discuss the motion and.
I'll second her motion just for more discussion. So you wanted to keep, we kept it the whole 80,000, so that would give, to do all these we'd do the projects out on the part of the wish list. But then I was wondering after, okay, so, and I'm thinking about yours about reducing it, like partially. I don't know whether that's feasible or not. I don't know, I'm just kind of, I'm still throwing it around in my mind.
That would require you to make.
Yeah, I know, yes, I know.
So
All right.
I think I'd allow the horse trading here, Sean.
I would like to make an amendment to reallocate 25% of the county fair funds. That way they'd still be able to do most of what they do, or what they would like to do or need to do to stay operable. But like you, Mr. Chair, pointed out correctly, these already operate the fair, and since the fair is not running this year, I don't think it's fair to the taxpayers who contributed this money expecting there to be a fair to contribute all to that source. That's not happening. Reallocate 75, keep 25.
75% to the fair board?
Correct, yeah.
So allocate 60 grand to fair board, take 20 from them.
Yeah.
Okay, so the amendment, do we have a second to the amendment? I'll second the amendment. The amendment is to allocate 75% of the budget to the fair board, which would be $60,000 for 2020, which is the amendment. So any discussion on that notion?
I guess I would, okay, if you did the 60, if we gave them 60,000, well, I guess you probably couldn't tell me, but what would you take out? I mean, what part wouldn't you fund? I mean, what couldn't you do?
There are a lot
It'd
of,
be 20,000 less than what you're anticipating.
you know, and I certainly appreciate whatever that you would be willing to give. The $20,000 would go a long way for some long-range goals, which are not that critical right at this particular moment. So we would be grateful for any portion of that.
I think we're being pretty disrespectful to the fair. They don't have a KIP plan. They're trying to make do. You look at, other than the barns, most of those buildings are really old. The bathrooms could certainly do with some upkeep, but this is not enough. I think that, and a lot of people care about the fair, and that's why they've contributed for the buildings. This is what the county's doing from all the residents. And like I say, it's only $80,000, and $20,000 for the fair is a lot bigger than $20,000 for the county. And this is for everybody, the fair is. And I just think that it's disrespectful to not give them what we allocated, because things continue, and they're going to continue next year, and they can, use the money. And I think it's very beneficial.
I'll counter, if we're going to have a debate, I'll counter that this is operating money and they're not having an operation. They're because they don't have a capital improvement plan, and they are making plans for the long term. They've built quite a few buildings, and they do their fundraising. They have a much, much larger budget than $80,000. So they have been doing long-term planning and making accommodations for that and fundraising, and they've been making good strides at actually doing capital improvements without taxpayer money being put into those long-term investments. This is to be operating expenses, and we are putting money into the actual conduct of the fair, which isn't happening. Now, because the fair isn't happening, we're going to see taxpayer money being invested in the long-term assets of the fairgrounds, which is contrary to my understanding of the way we fund the fair. And if you'll forgive the pun, it's unfair to the taxpayer for us to be putting money into the fair board's buildings. That's my opinion, but I'm entitled to it. So I would prefer to cut back on the funds a little bit, which gives you a hint of how I'd vote on that thing. So we have an amendment to vote on, and then we'll vote on the main motion if there's no further discussion. Ed or Sean, do you have anything to say? Okay, let's vote on the amendment to go 75% of the budget. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Okay. The amendment passes. The main motion then, as amended, is the same as the amendment, which is 75% of the budget. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? No. That motion carries as well. Thank you very much. Gail, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, and I know that was painful. I appreciate you enduring it. Now we're going to enter a complicated conversation. Heather, Amos, Brett, and Ellen are going to lead us in a conversation, review, and discussion of the DNR comments regarding the draft shoreline ordinance. And I'd draw your attention to packet page 180 for the summary. And then I'll hand over to Ellen.
Excuse me. I think what I would like to do, just kind of to make sure that everyone understands where we're at, is I think I'm just going to walk through what's in the packet real quick, and then after walking through what's in the packet, try to explain it, then we'll come back and Brett can touch on some of these items real specifically. So first point out that on the agenda, we put two items. One is the review and discussion of the DNR comments. And that first item, Julie has jumped us to the page, or someone has jumped us, thank you, Ken, to a summary page, which is at the end of that, that summarizes what those DNR comments were. And we also have a second agenda item, which is what was the County Board of Supervisors referred the adoption of the shoreline ordinance back to committee. So the second agenda item is a continuation of that agenda item that was at the county board at their last meeting and then was referred back. So that's why there's two items like that. So what we were trying to do that in order to provide an opportunity to look at the comments. So in this, and I'm just going to skim up and explain a little bit. This is a copy of the document that we got back from the Wisconsin DNR with their comments, and what they did was they literally, this says, you can see, it says L-U-T, ZEK, Z-E-K, that stands for K at the end, her name is Kay, K-A-Y, Lutzy, And that is the person from the DNR who made all the comments. So that's what that stands for. And then she asked questions like, how is this different? That kind of thing. She asked questions and they were just inserted. There was no way for us to print this and get the comments to print. So we had to put this document in like this. So again, they're all through this first version of the ordinance under that first agenda item, which is review of those comments. So then for convenience to you, on page, get down to it. This will be packet page 180. The staff summarized the DNR comments. And then that's what we have here. And we also noted at the bottom that in addition to the DNR comments, after review and discussion with our legal counsel, corporation counsel, Scott Cox, and Assistant Corporation Counsel Heather Amos. There was also some general edits that they wanted to see done, changing some various wording to more ordinance appropriate language, which was done. So I'm going to jump back to this in a minute and just point out that on the second agenda item, which was again the item referred back from the County Board of Supervisors, we expanded on the background statement, made it a little bit longer, and pointed out, and none of this, I do apologize, but we just couldn't get it done quicker. There was a lot of changes. We had to double check and make sure they were done correctly. So these did get attached this week. Everything else was attached last week to the agenda packet. But we put in here both a copy of the PDF from that has all the track changes that are underlined or strike out. We also attached a completely untracked copy, which is what you would officially be forwarding to the County Board of Supervisors. And to distinguish those documents, the previous original document that you had forwarded from the June Community Development Committee meeting was dated with the date, June 6th, June 18th, excuse me. The track changes document was dated, I believe, tonight. And the county board, the one that you would accept all those changes document, was dated 8/4. So that's how we tried to provide it to you to make it clear what we were doing. So those various documents, there's of course next is the actual ordinance, which hasn't had any changes since originally proposed. And then this one you'll see says real clearly at the beginning of it, track changes with the committee's date on it. And then if we were to keep going down, at the end of this one, and again, it has all the changes underlined or strike out. Find a good example here. There's a good page. They are slightly different colors, just because different people were running the computer at the time we worked on each section. So you can see they have strikeout or insert as needed. So all those changes were done. We don't intend to walk through each and every change. We simply intend to summarize them and ask you to take a look at them. An example of another change that was done was changing the official effective date from, instead of August, because it wouldn't be actioned by the county board until our August meeting, so it would become effective in September. Small little changes like that. So with that, I'm going to go back to that summary page and ask Brett Boudreau to summarize those DNR comments or answer any questions about them since the list is there. I get page 180, I think it was, right? Yep. It is a big packet, but we do know that people like to see the track changes, so we try to always make sure we provide those. Lots of pages. At this point, I'm 2 pages away. Here we go. Okay. Brett, do you want to come up?
Okay, I'll begin with the first one. DNR comment on section 16.205. That was the table 16205.1, add additional details to the table to match the text. You can see that in your packet. We added additional information to the second bullet, 300 feet of the ordinary high water mark or to the landward side of the floodplain boundary, whichever distance is greater. DNR Representative Kay wanted to see more information there. 16.315, I'm just going to go to those sections and I'll show you those edits and I'll move through the document here. Principal structure setbacks. Structure setbacks actually are applying the standards to all structures. So we removed all principal structures, and they shall apply to all structures and buildings located in the shoreland area. There's another part where we actually address accessory structures, so that's why we had these two separate sections in the beginning, but Kay brought this to our attention. We needed to adjust that so you can see where we struck out principal through there, removed that, so these structure setbacks apply to all structures, principal and accessory. And this is an example of where we inserted shall be versus is required. That was our own insertion. The next example is 16.32. Right here, we added the word exempt. Previously, we had accessory structure setbacks. So this section, 16.32, applies only to exempt accessory structures, meaning these accessory structures are exempt to the shoreline setback. The shoreline setback is 75 feet. The accessory structures listed below can occur within that 75 feet. So we adjusted the language there. Accessory structures listed in this section, 3 through 8, shall be allowed within the 75-foot setback. And those structures are boathouses, open-sided screen structures, then we talked about the vegetative buffer. One of the items was a pedestrian access or walkways. We revised that. So we revised and clarify. The next one is 16.330, revise the non-conforming standards also to apply to accessory structures. Let me get to that. 330, non-conforming uses. Previously, we had an existing principal structure, so we removed principal. The non-conforming uses and structures now apply to all structures that are non-conforming. Lateral expansion of a structure requires a permit. And also expansion beyond the setback requires a land use permit. Previously, we didn't have that. We added that. That was a DNR comment. Section 335, impervious surfaces. Any new impervious surface requires a land use permit. And in our reading of it, it didn't require a land use permit. But DNR informed us that it didn't require a land use permit, so we added that back in, which was the same as our current ordinance actually is. So we're going back to that same standard. So impervious surfaces, new impervious requires a permit. 16.340 is vegetation. And we had quite a discussion about the vegetation removal standards in the creation of an access and viewing corridor within the vegetative buffer zone shall be allowed subject to the following. So the blue is what we added. The cross out is where we took out. In the reading of that language between administrative code and statute, you have to allow at least a 35-foot viewing corridor for every 100 feet of shoreline. And the way it was written before, we said it had to be 35 feet. It can be less. And we would actually kind of encourage that. And so we have added that language to here to be a maximum of 35 feet. And then in the administrative code and statute, it uses the word contiguously versus continuously. So if they have more than 100 feet, they can expand their viewing corridor. And they can also have multiple viewing corridors versus just one. So we had to also make that apparent. And the viewing corridor does not require a land use permit, so we had to strike that. Moving on to 16.3552. Our permit table. We revised the permit table here to reflect those changes to where a land use permit was required or not required. We also added information so that we didn't have conflicting information in our ordinance between the table and the various sections. We added this information right here, that the table is for illustrative purposes to help the permittee understand. We again struck principal here. Structure setbacks, we added an activity to a principal structure setback and added exempt to these accessory structures. You can see where we got rid of permits and added information in the permit table. In 16.46, variance criteria. Get to that. Here we go. Sorry. There it is. 16.46. We added information down here about the approval criteria for granting variances. The Board of Adjustment may grant a variance if the property owner demonstrates those various items 1 through 3. And then B, 6B, the Board of Adjustment shall not grant a variance that has the effect of granting or increasing any use of property which is prohibited in that zoning district by the shoreline zoning ordinance. And we added various other information below it. We took out item 3 there to meet our own Corp Council advice as well as what the DNR asked us to do. Then finally, in 16.605, definitions, additions, and edits, we added a definition of boathouse. There's boathouse, a permanent structure used for the storage of watercraft and associated materials, and includes all structures which are totally enclosed, have roofs and walls, or any combination of these structural parts. That comes right from the DNR model ordinance. We made edits to the navigable water section or definition. Previously, we said do not apply to lands adjacent to farm drainage ditches if, and then we had these two sections right here, but we needed to edit that. Farm drainage ditches where such lands are not adjacent to a navigable stream or river, and such lands were not navigable streams before ditching, and artificially constructed drainage ditches, ponds, or stormwater retention basins that are not hydrologically connected to a natural navigable water body. So we added those two items, again, to meet statutes and the DNR model ordinance. Going down further, principal dwelling and structures, removed porches, and removed porches from a principal structure. And then finally, the shoreline wetland district definition. Right here, we were requested to add the Wisconsin wetland inventory. Previously, you had wetland maps, which have been adopted and made part of this chapter, and I believe they are referenced in another place within the chapter, but we added that to the definition, Wisconsin wetland inventory. And then we, as staff and council, made additional changes. Questions?
Does this have to go back to the DNR to make sure that what was done is the way they want it, or is this, can this go to the county board now?
These are the comments that we received from DNR on the public hearing ordinance, and we will send them a copy of it. They don't go any further than this in their review. They don't certify it or approve it, but we will send it back to them. I suppose there could be some additional comments, but we have done or addressed all of the ones that they had.
So if they did have any more, we could just amend whatever
Yes.
the county board approves?
Right.
Okay.
So we're safe in passing this at the county board level at this point?
Yes, I believe we are. And in fact, if they do have more comments, it's not actually mandatory that you adopt them.
Right.
They're advisory at that point, so. These aren't even, but we can ask Heather to weigh in. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Oh, you are correct that the county board could adopt this as is. If there's any changes needed in the future, we can always amend the ordinance if needed. But as staff have indicated, this is advisory comments from the DNR. It's not required to be certified by them. So I think we are good to proceed forward to the county board if this body adopts it to go through.
That's my next question. We brought this back for review. Do you need us to adopt it again?
Yes, you have to recommend approval with these changes, and then the track change and the clean change version will go forward to the county board. So you take action on the second agenda item, not the first. Item number 8, you need to take action on,
Well then,
recommending approval.
we need a motion. Oh, going back to the agenda. Here, Ed. Ed, have an agenda. Item number 8.
We needed a motion to approve the ordinance, is it number 8? It is, the last one. I'll make a motion that we make, repeal chapter 17, subchapter 3, section 1730 of the St. Croix County Code of Ordinances with the shoreline overlay districts and reenacting the shoreline districts, overlay districts as chapter 16 of the St. Croix County Code of Ordinances.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Moving forward, do we have any announcements and correspondence?
We actually have several items for announcements. The first one is Kristen Bruder has been on Zoom waiting to make an announcement. She might not have come back on. She was on. Do you know if
Yep,
she's-
I'm here.
Oh, there she is.
Yep.
She's the first.
Hi there. Good evening, everyone. the Zoom thing, I'm starting to get the hang of it. So I just wanted to take just a second of your time just to update you as to where extension is in regards to COVID-19. We were hopeful to be done telecommuting by yesterday, actually, but given the current increase in COVID-19 cases, UW-Madison and Dean Carl Martin have given the directive that extension will stay in phase 1 and continue telecommuting into the foreseeable future. So what that means is our educators will continue to work remotely. Phase 1 includes gatherings of 10 or less with safety precautions in place. So that's currently where we're at. We're going to be staying in that phase, most likely indefinitely. We're not putting a date on, just given the uncertainty of how COVID will continue into the future. So beginning at next month's committee meeting, each educator will give a brief presentation of their institute, their programming, and impacts to St. Croix County, just to give you a better understanding of Extension's work in the county. Ryan Sterry, our ag educator, will present in August. So we're going to start that, just having each educator come in and just give you an update, give you the opportunity to ask questions, give an opportunity to let them know of any concerns that you have in your districts. So we'll start that in August. And that will likely be via Zoom. Ryan will present via Zoom in August, and we'll move forward in terms of where we're at in September, October, and onward. So that's my brief update. Do you have any questions regarding the telecommuting policy or extension in general?
I'm sorry, Kristen, there's no questions for an announcement?
Okay, great, thank you.
Tim Stieber is going to give you a brief update on the water quality study project.
Okay, good evening. Despite COVID-19, we've continued to do free water nitrate clinics. We planned it out so that we could maintain social distancing, et cetera, and we've had excellent response in Baldwin and then again in the town of Troy. We have another one planned for next week, the 23rd, for the town of St. Joe. And one was canceled. That was in Somerset. So we had planned to do 4 of those events, and we've got 3 that are pretty much in the bag. So that's good news. Interest is high. Other things that the water quality team has been working on has been, we did some response related to flooding of wells and brownwater reporting in wells, and trying to protect the public and ensure that the messages get out to be careful with your water if your well is flooded. Other work is coming up shortly. In April, we're going to complete a series of nitrate source analysis tests that we've been working to set up, where we might be able to help make some sense about the source of nitrate that we've been seeing in the wells. And then also at the end of the year in October, we're going to have the second round of the community groundwater monitoring program, which has about 190 wells. So that'll be the second round of that will be completed. And then there is a story map that was prepared by staff to help people understand what we're trying to get accomplished through the community groundwater monitoring program, and that's on our website, I believe, right, Julie? So it's supposed to be. I know I commented on it when it was up for review, and they were going to post it. So we're completing a lot of the groundwater quality work that we were assigned. We also have a draft of the spill response plan that we were asked to prepare, and we're waiting for some comments from public health to finish that, to take it actually to our committee review and public review. So that'll come up probably this late summer, fall. We'll get it to you for review. In the resource management side, staff have been busy responding to landowner requests to fix or give comment about what they could do to help repair problems caused by recent flooding. large rainfall event. In addition to the many roads and bridges and culverts that were wiped out and altered by the storm, they've actually gone out on landslides, et cetera, to try to measure and weigh options and provide options to landowners. What we've been doing is giving the 211 number out to landowners so that they could call in the damage, and hopefully that would tally in with the final request for assistance to the county from the state. I don't believe that's going to meet the federal criteria, but we believe there'll be some funds from the state. And so we're continuing to give feedback to landowners in that manner. There hasn't been a lot from the ag community. We feel there's probably some bad erosion in fields that you can't see because they have crops in them. So there may be more reported this fall when they get into those fields. One of the things we have seen is that there's less damage in some of the fields that have good practices. So residue management, cover crops, those sorts of things resulted in less washouts and problems. With this recent storm in our mind, kind of fresh, it should be noted that I was in a statewide meeting online where this is being reported all over the state with increasing frequency. And without getting into an argument about the causes of the frequent rains and the climate change that we've seen, we can agree that we are seeing these at great frequency now, and some of these storms are 500-year storms that we're seeing, and we're seeing them every few years. One of the things that I would maybe just call to your attention is that some of the other counties are starting to discuss the need to design structures such as culverts, bridges, et cetera, to a higher standard than we typically have. And obviously that's a sore topic because it costs more. But if we don't have to replace them as often, it may be the way to go. And I just raised that, your awareness to that. And in some cases where it's private lands, we can recommend that they design to a higher standard if they don't want to have to replace it again. So in some cases, people are already doing that. We're seeing problems with some of the stormwater ponds, culverts and driveways and those sorts of things. Last item is that we have a pot of cost share funding. We're trying to expire or utilize prior to expiring at the end of the year, December 31st. It only applies to the town of Hammond, Baldwin, Pleasant Valley, Rush River, and Ogali. And we're trying to focus on practices such as well abandonment. Obviously, if you have landscape that floods a lot, old wells are easy to get contamination down into the ground, so we'd like to abandon those. And then also manure pit abandonment is a high priority because we can easily do those projects quickly. So other than that, unless you have any questions.
Well, we don't take questions during announcements, but I think there's so much there that we'd probably want to put all of this in a staff report during a committee meeting. And probably soon, if not next month, the month after, and actually talk about our water quality subject. So I appreciate you bringing all of this to the committee, and we would like to flesh it out again in a month or two. Thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you.
Other announcements?
Brett Boudreau has a quick one.
Yes, regarding the comprehensive revision of zoning and town adoption, we're coming up on the end of the.
These are not announcements. What? Sorry, these are not, Mr. Chair, these are not announcements. These are staff reports that should have been agended.
Duly noted. These are staff reports that should have been agended.
Okay.
We'll do a better job on that for our next meeting. We'll just hold our fire on that and do a better job on that on our next meeting. Thank you, Counselor. Any announcements? No. Future agenda items. I have one. I'd like to talk about the home which is burned, owned by the county on County Road H in Star Prairie Township. I'd like to put it on the agenda for next month, possibly to discuss whether or not that property is buildable lot and possibly putting it into conservancy. Any other agenda items? No? Then,
And the only reason I'm thinking of this is because of what's happened up in the cities where they're limiting the tents and the parks and whatnot. And I know I had someone, another supervisor say that they were concerned about the homeless in St. Croix County, especially with the COVID increasing. And I don't know if the parks have had, I don't know if that would be an agenda item or not, but wondering if the park situation is being abused or if it can be used for homeless or exactly what's happened. I don't know if that's worthy of being an agenda. That's probably not the right word. And I mean, the reason it's on my mind is what's been happening up in the cities and the fact that a supervisor made a comment to me that St. Croix County does not have enough housing for the homeless, and if it's getting colder and the COVID doesn't go away, what are we supposed to do? And I don't know how that affects community development, but it could. And that would be something to kind of, it'd be nice to have some foresight instead of hindsight.
we'll take a look at that, Judy. Any other agenda items? Seeing none, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.